Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the Arkham Sessions, brought to you by Comics Alliance. As always, I am Brian Ward, and I am joined by the person that we're really all here to listen to, Dr. Andrea Litamendi.
I don't know if that's true, but I'll take it.
I'm here to listen to you. So, we are taking a look at the new direct-to-video movie, Assault on Arkham, which is technically a Batman title, but really, let's be honest, they should have just called it Suicide Squad, Assault on Arkham.
Yeah, Batman is in this film, but he's not exactly a primary character.
Right, which I kind of like. I like that this particular movie supposedly is hooked in some way to the world of the Arkham Asylum video games.
Right.
Which are insanely popular. And throughout the movie, we do in fact see that Arkham Asylum resembles the Arkham from the games.
Sure.
We go into Penguin's Iceberg Lounge, and that setup is identical to the video game.
Yeah, it's nicely done. However, if you have never played any of the video games or you're not as familiar with the context of the video games, this film still pretty much...
It's just fine, yeah.
I see it very independent
of
absolutely. Any of the video games.
Absolutely. If you've not seen the film, that's okay. We're not going to spoil it. Usually when we talk about Batman the Animated Series, and in the past we talked about Batman from Tim Burton, those are 25-year-old stories. We understand that not everyone has gone right out and bought Assault on Arkham. So if you've not seen it, don't worry. We're going to try to prevent any sort of major spoilers. We're not going to go through the whole movie the way we usually do. We're just basically going to talk about the characters. We're going to apply some psychology to the folks we see.
And again, this is a unique podcast that is specifically focused on the psychology of Batman. Now, primarily Batman the Animated Series.
Yeah.
But again, we're delving now into an animated film.
Yeah, we take these little detours every now and again because they're fun.
Right, but our aim and our mission is pretty much the same. We lift the psychological themes out of the episode or out of the film, and we really focus on that. We talk about not just what happens in the context of the characters and the stories there, but also in the real psychology of that, and try to bring up real studies, real research, kind of the relevant explanations of those very important topics.
And just like with our Batman the Animated Series analyses, Drea, I'm going to put some ground rules onto you.
No.
You absolutely have to follow these. We are not allowed to look at the Suicide Squad or Batman or any of these other characters through the lens of any other incarnation of them. We have to stick to what we have seen in this movie. So forget the last time you saw Harley Quinn.
That is impossible.
Forget the last time you saw the Joker. These are new characters for us.
But, we'll get into this, but there's clearly history.
Absolutely.
Between and among these characters.
There will never not be history between Harley and the Joker, but we are only going to talk about the history of Harley and the Joker as alluded to in this movie. We're not going to refer to them as, hey, remember that episode where Harley was introduced? Because these are very different characters. We will warn you, this movie, maybe not so much for kids. It is...
No, there's there's nudity, there's some sexual content, there's some language, there are some violent scenes.
Yeah.
This is unlike Batman the Animated Series.
If you're into dark anime-esque quality film making, especially when you're talking about you want your darker, your grittier Batman, you want people to die over the course of a movie, whether it's guards at Arkham or whomever, you're this is the movie for you.
Yeah, this is for the Frank Miller, Alan Moore type readers.
Let's talk about it a little bit. Like we said before, it's called Batman Assault on Arkham, but really it should be called Suicide Squad Assault on Arkham, because we are basically dealing with a new Suicide Squad team. If you're not familiar with the Suicide Squad, this is a team that's really been around quite a long time, but I would say probably the modern day incarnation of it started with John Ostrander, the writer of Suicide Squad, starting in 1987. And this is a team that was created and engineered by Amanda Waller.
The Wall.
I'm Amanda Waller. I'm here to indoctrinate you convicts into our special forces.
She basically puts together this crack unit of criminals and sends them out on missions. Well, why do they have to listen to what she says? They may or may not have explosive devices inside their necks.
Right.
So it's a little bit of incentive to actually follow orders and to stay in line.
Yeah.
And you've got a pretty successful team since, 1987.
She's brilliant, right? She uses the risk-taking, sensation-seeking personality qualities of what she calls criminals, right?
Yeah.
And she takes advantage of that and sends them on these really life-threatening missions. And she considers that their lives are disposable. So you really have a formula for exactly what she needs for what she's going after here.
Let's talk about that. I want to talk about each member of the team. I want to start with their leader.
No more crap! No more time! No more shenanigans!
What kind of a person sees these people and thinks, A, this could be a team, B, I really don't care about them. They are completely expendable. So far as even I will kill them without a second second thought. Let's talk about Amanda, because I think she is just as much a villain as any one of these other characters.
Yeah, I mean, she falls in that really gray area because she treats the team members poorly. She, like I said, she believes that they're disposable. She's willing to discard of them. She's willing to sacrifice them. Ultimately, she's sending them on some kind of specific mission, some goal-oriented mission where, she's not just playing around. She really is setting up a team that is unlike no other. And I think she's genuinely trying to do the right thing, and she has to use brute force. She has to be tough. She has to be, just incredibly and full of intelligence, but incredibly willing to be the one to do some harmful things, to be somewhat destructive in order to get the job done.
Let's talk about her psychology a little bit. Is this the type of person that I should be scared of?
I think you want her on your side.
You certainly don't want to be against her.
No, I mean, she works for the government. She has a doctorate in political science. She's clearly highly educated, very intelligent, and you kind of want her to be on your team. You want her to be the kind of person who's a leader. When we think about the type of managers that are effective, it really is someone with her personality type.
I mean, scare tactics to the nth degree.
Sure, but she also knows that she's kind of throwing them a bone, right? Because otherwise, where would they be?
Right.
They would be in Arkham. They would be at Blackgate. They would be at some kind of treatment center. So she knows that she's offering them an opportunity to get out of their dire situation. And she also knows that what she's asking them to engage in is something that's somewhat pleasurable for them, which we'll get into throughout as we talk about this film. But she's very particular when she selects these members of this team. There is going to be some gain for them, and she knows that.
I think it's interesting that you talk about her in such a way that you say she has a lot of the qualities that you would want in a good leader. She's certainly someone that you would want on your side in a fight, which very well may be true. However, in 2009, Amanda Waller was selected as the 60th greatest comic book villain of all time by IGN. And in the Necessary Evil documentary, in which you are prominently featured, I think they even talk about Amanda a little bit when discussing the Suicide Squad and how she might be a bit villainous. So,
yeah.
So it's interesting that villains can actually have those qualities that you want in a good leader. Mm-hmm. They're just kind of bad people.
Well, and it speaks to the complexity of their psychology, that you could have all of these characteristics that, put in the wrong setting, could be incredibly destructive,
right.
Antisocial. But she's kind of like, when she's in the right setting, in the right context, with the right government position, depending on exactly what mission she's heading, it might work out.
How do we start?
Probably the leader of this particular incarnation of the Suicide Squad, Deadshot, otherwise known as Floyd Lawton. Mm-hmm. Floyd has been around comics for quite some time. He was introduced in Batman number 59. That was in 1950. And basically his whole deal is he is probably the greatest assassin of the DC universe. He basically doesn't miss. This guy has no regard for human life.
Well, not exactly. He has regard for human life. What I like about it, and again, if we're just looking at what Assault on Arkham gives us, which is, limited to 90 minutes or so, I have to say that they really gave us a lot with Deadshot. He is, as you said, pretty much the leader of this gang. He's pretty dynamic. He's pretty multidimensional to the degree that you can get in this kind of animated context, and they give us some psychology with him. We see in the beginning of the film that he's carrying around this picture of this young girl. We get the impression it's his daughter. Or
that comes from a mini-series that was released in 2005.
Hey, now you're breaking the rules.
I'm not breaking the rules. I mean, because this is clearly part of that canon. I'm explaining who the daughter is.
Oh, who's this girl? Okay.
In 2005, Deadshot discovered he had a daughter. And she was being raised in Star City, which was, not the kind of place you would want to raise a daughter. Very much like Gotham City.
Yeah.
Very much filled to the brim with crime. And so, basically, Deadshot then goes on a warpath in order to make sure she's raised right. He's
an assassin.
He's got love for his daughter.
He's really, you see him throughout this movie as almost, now they call him an anti-hero, but
it's true.
He really becomes the hero. He really, like you said, and again, I don't want to give too much away here, Batman is of course involved in the story, but Deadshot has a very prominent role and really enacts that heroic role.
From the very beginning, he's the guy who, once Amanda says, this is what we're doing, he goes, all right, let's get this thing done. Let's go. You guys follow me. The other thing about Deadshot is he has a code of ethics. This is a guy who, well, as long as you pay him, he'll do anything you want. He is very much a mercenary. But we see at one point in the film when another member of his team is threatened by someone who is helping them out, is working with them, he makes it very clear that it's bad business.
Do you know what else is bad for business, sir? Double-crossing your clients.
So he does have this albeit weird and maybe even a little twisted sort of sense of ethics, which very much falls in line with the anti-hero campaign. But let's move forward. The next prominent figure over the course of this movie, I would say without a doubt, Harley Quinn.
We see her in the beginning of the movie. She's in a support center. She's at some halfway house where this kind of goes back to some of the animated series episodes where random people will be reading Tiny Toons or or looking at a comic and it's related to Bugs Bunny. She's actually watching some kind of Looney Tunes show on her little device or DS or something, or her phone, and it gets taken away while she's at this supportive center. And it's a funny scene. I mean, she does something pretty horrific, but it's great how they start off that way because you realize just how severe her, psychopathy is.
Well, and because we first see her in a halfway house, and she seems so young.
Yeah.
You almost get the sense that they are abandoning the history that we've always known about her. But at some point in time over the course of the movie, she does, in fact, mention that she used to work in Arkham.
As a psychiatrist, silly.
According to what we do know about her, she could not fulfill her duties as a practitioner.
Right.
And, that isn't completely uncommon. That can happen, especially if somebody is experiencing their own mental health issues, or they just find that particular career to be too challenging or difficult for them. And part of that, of course, is her encounter with the Joker while she's a psychiatry intern. And that story is pretty well known, but when she meets him, she's in a bit of a susceptible time in her life and time in her career because she's still a trainee. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's important to know, even though it's not really touched upon too much in this film. It's important to know that that history is there, and she was quite young and she was still a trainee when that occurred, and he took advantage of her, and ultimately they formed this really close bond, and she became his partner, both a romantic partner and partner in crime. Right. So at this point we see her in what ostensibly is a residential treatment center, and if she's there, we can assume that she's motivated or she has some willingness to get better, even though it's probably mandated by the court. And, she misbehaves a bit.
Yeah, let's talk about that bit of her personality. She is, without a doubt, a bit of a risk taker.
Yeah.
And I'm not allowed to say it, but maybe a little on the crazy side.
Well, I mean, but what do you mean when people say, well, she's crazy? Well, what is your evidence for that? We see her bite off someone's ear. That's
crazy.
That's pretty extreme.
Right.
Right? We see her as, there's a part of the movie where they're each put in a enclosed rocket. I mean, they're basically being sent down to Arkham Asylum, and the way that they're sent there is kind of interesting. They're in an airplane, and then they're kind of shot down individually in these little cells. Everyone's freaking out and screaming. It's unpleasant for them, but she finds it exhilarating. She finds it fun. She's enjoying it. She has this sort of sensation-seeking type of personality, that thrill taker, that risk taker, and that's at the extreme level, of course. That's one of those characteristics that we should worry about. Those are the kind of individuals that will seek potentially dangerous and destructive types of scenarios because they enjoy that thrill so much.
Let's talk about that, because at one point in time over the course of the movie, we actually see that she might be someone who enjoys pain.
Well, but those are sensations that we experience as painful.
Yeah.
So she may experience them, they may be physically painful, but she may experience that euphoria that comes with that.
Right.
So I might tell you, for instance, that being in a race car is painful because you're strapped down, there's too much pressure. I would say that's painful to my body because of the speed and the velocity. Someone else might say that's exhilarating, it's pleasurable, it feels good. So in the same way, I mean, of course it's extreme, but she might experience something like electroshock therapy as being pleasurable when, we know the majority of people who experience that, it is actually painful.
And this might even go with the thrill-seeking aspect of her personality. In this particular incarnation of Harley, she is particularly sexual. Mm-hmm. Uses her body in ways that I don't know that I've seen too often Harley Quinn using it.
I thought you meant like in life.
Well, maybe. But highly sexual.
But this isn't uncharacteristic of her, given what we just talked about. That, again, individuals who are thrill seekers, I mean, that also bleeds into sexual activity.
Okay.
So promiscuity, sex with strangers, multiple partners, sex with individuals who might hurt you, like the dangerous type of partners. You know, people that your parents said, yeah, don't date that guy. That's the guy she's going to go for.
So she's actually pretty realistic for a character.
I think so.
Maybe a little on the extreme side, but not so far gone that you would put her outside the realm of possibility.
Yeah, I think that, you know, as you said, this is a version that's a bit more gritty compared to, you know, of course, Batman the Animated Series and other comics versions of her. But I think that ultimately they are sticking to her personality. They're sticking to her psychology pretty firmly.
So let's talk about our next member of the team, Captain Boomerang.
I told you, Harley. If you're giving it out, heave a chunk my way, eh?
Love him.
Digger Harkness, as we've always known and love him, he's an Australian villain who, much to his name's credit, his weapon of choice is, in fact, killer boomerangs. And at one point in time, there is a line of dialogue that I absolutely love, and it's by Harley, who was the former psychiatrist, telling Captain Boomerang,
And pal, anyone who throws boomerangs has some real issues letting go.
Yeah, love it.
how would you analyze Captain Boomerang in this incarnation of the Suicide Squad?
I think he's great here. I've always loved Captain Boomerang, though. I think that, you know, he has that reputation. He's a bit of a scrapper, you know. He's resentful. He needs to prove himself. And it kind of, he's likable in a way because he's kind of the underdog and you root for him.
Sure.
And he's creative. I mean, like you said, he uses boomerangs in all these different creative ways to, you know, to murder and injure other people. And you kind of see that throughout this film. So he's got a darker sense of humor. He's a bit sarcastic. But again, that makes him likable. I feel like we can relate to him.
He's not exactly... The thing is, when you put Captain Boomerang and Deadshot together, as much as you want to root for the guy with the boomerangs, Deadshot is just a better character. And so I don't know that I'm necessarily rooting for Captain Boomerang. But he is fun. He's sort of the comic relief. He's a little on the, I won't say perverted side, but he likes his ladies. The ladies don't necessarily like him, which might be why I don't like him. And
right, I think he hits on both Harley and
Killer Frost. Yeah, and
neither of them are having it.
No one's having the redhead on the team, so maybe that's why I don't like him. He's no idol of mine. But he is a lot of fun in this particular movie, and you know, really not much more you can say about him.
There's a ton I can say about him, but I don't want to spoil things.
Okay, so let's then talk about, we touched on it a little bit, Killer Frost.
Nothing gets past you, genius.
This is, of course, Louise Lincoln, and she is now a member of the Suicide Squad. Let's talk about her a little bit. In this particular movie, we see that she, for those who don't know, Killer Frost is basically DC's version of Iceman from Marvel. She's got the ability to touch things and turn it into ice. So unlike Mr. Freeze, who is just insanely cold and needs to stay cold to stay alive and uses a gun to turn things to ice, she does it with her hands. Yeah. And she's got the sub-zero temperatures as well. Let's talk about her a little bit. She's a different member of the team in that, for whatever reason, Amanda Waller sort of handpicks her to carry out a separate side mission. And we'll talk about their mission a little bit in a minute, but talk about Louise Lincoln?
She's similar to Poison Ivy. She has that, but without that ulterior motive.
Sure.
You know, she's certainly more interested in herself. You know, Poison Ivy seems to have this larger kind of mission.
She's also very much in the same light as Poison Ivy, but also Harley in this particular movie. Louise Lincoln, a little on the sexual side, uses her body at one point.
Well, it's a tactic. Well, it's a tactic that the team uses, which I don't really fault. I think everybody, and this is great about, you know, finally we get a group dynamic. We get to see how the group works together. We get to see inter-group conflict. And so everybody has their own strengths, their own sort of like the powers that they use, their abilities. And yeah, everyone is in agreement that if she's using her sexuality and her nudity, that she can help, you know, move through this mission. They can succeed. And so, but everybody's like that. You know, Deadshot has his assassin abilities. You know, Captain Boomerang is slick and sneaky. You know, all these kinds of abilities that they have. Yeah, the women tend to use their sexuality in their bodies, which is really, you know, of course, that's an interesting thing above and beyond the Suicide Squad. Right. This is a comics thing, I think.
Yeah.
But it tends to be used here as a tactic for them to facilitate this mission.
She does have the ability to see, I don't know if it's right and wrong, but it's certainly beneficial versus non-beneficial. And that is, there are moments in this movie where she could kill someone, for instance, but doesn't because it might help her in one way or another. So she's not a straight up killer without purpose.
Yeah.
Which is, unlike some of the other characters in the movie, you know, a plus.
Right.
Let's move on to the Black Spider.
I don't trust vermin. Honorless, rudderless, undisciplined.
This version of him is Eric Needham, the original name he was given back when he was created in the mid-70s. Needham is interesting because he's not necessarily your typical criminal. In fact, he's, at best, he was sort of small time. He was a drug addict, but ended up donning a costume to become a vigilante, essentially, and kill criminals and to kill drug dealers.
Right, I was going to say related to his drug addiction or his history with substances.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And so he ends up sort of becoming a vigilante, unlike Batman in that his goal is to kill them, sort of Punisher-esque methods. Batman is against this, so sort of puts him in the criminal category. But Eric Needham doesn't like being considered a criminal and actually resents being a member of the Suicide Squad because he doesn't like teaming up with a bunch of criminals. He doesn't see himself as a criminal. He sees himself as a hero doing the right thing, albeit on the extreme side. But I wouldn't say this is by any stretch of the imagination the first time that the Black Spider has ever allied himself with villains. So he is one of those guys that walks a very weird line.
Yeah.
And seems to be appropriately placed in the Suicide Squad for this particular mission. Not a huge role, maybe a little subdued in this particular movie, but good.
Well, you get the sense that he's kind of above it, that he certainly doesn't align with them. He sees himself as different than the other team members. And I will tell you this, you should never Google Black Spider without also entering the words DC Comics or something related to comics, because those images will haunt you.
I don't do freaky deaky.
King Shark.
How can you not love King Shark?
You know I'm going to say that I love King Shark because I love Killer Croc. I love Clayface.
You like the big mutiny monstery characters.
I do. I have a soft spot for the big monsters.
Okay.
I think it's sort of the Frankenstein thing that, you know, you feel for them. They do what they have to do, but there's some sympathy, there's some compassion there.
And I will say that very much like the Frankenstein's monster, he's not the smartest. He's not the most articulate. He does have that charm about him that you root for him because mentally he's a bit of an underdog. But he is a brute. He is a big, giant, hulking mass of half man, half shark.
And like Killer Croc, there have been different versions of him physically, where in some versions he's basically a giant shark.
Right.
In this version, he's a humanoid shark. He's walking upright with, I would say, kind of a humanish face, but he has shark-like teeth.
Right. And a metal sort of jaw as well.
And he's burly and tough, but I would say he's you can tell he has some intelligence. He problem solves throughout the movie. There are times when he actually makes good points. He's very direct and to the point. He's not really capable of abstract thinking, but he is, I would say, he is a contributor to the team.
Sure.
Above and beyond his physical abilities.
And not only that, but he's the only character in the entire movie that shows a weakness in terms of King Shark is scared of heights. And there's a point in the course of that movie where that sort of plays a little bit of a factor for him. But again, it tugs on the heartstrings a little bit. Here's this hulking mass with just the worst jaw, and this is a guy you would not want to be caught alone with if you were on his bad side, and yet scared of heights.
Yeah, and he and Killer Frost form this bond together.
Yeah.
There's something about each other that they're drawn to, and they help each other out. And that relationship and how they help each other is just another aspect of why I think that a good part of this movie is done really well. It really does draw you in. And I don't know if we're supposed to be confused about who we're rooting for. Yeah. But I was on their side. I wanted Suicide Squad to succeed.
So let's talk about some of the, it seems weird to say this, but supporting characters. Like Batman, voiced once again by the legendary Kevin Conroy. Batman is in this movie.
Was he in this movie?
Maybe a little bit. He was in it ever so slightly. He was in it enough to call it Batman Assault on Arkham.
I think he's on the cover.
He is on the cover, and you might see him in the background of a scene or two. No, seriously, this is clearly the same Batman personality from the Arkham video games. The tell me where he is kind of Batman.
Level up.
Not a huge personality on this particular Batman. He is out looking for a dirty bomb that was set by the Joker somewhere in Gotham City. So he's basically off doing something else for most of the movie, completely unrelated to the Suicide Squad's mission. Which, by the way,
he's got to look for all those little Riddler clues. That takes hours.
He's not looking for Riddler clues.
You spent hours looking for those.
I did, yes, and I found each and every one of them, but that's beside the point. Yeah, Batman, not a whole lot going on there. I will say that there is a point where this movie just completely lost me, which is that apparently Batman carries backup cowls.
Oh, yeah.
Which just seems weird to me. But
no, you kind of have to
carry a backup cowl.
When you're dealing with the Suicide Squad, you have to
carry a backup cowl.
Yeah.
All right. Not a whole lot can be said about Batman in this one. But you know who we can talk about? The Joker.
Yes.
Aren't you even going to say hello?
The Joker makes a bit of an appearance in Assault on Arkham. In the beginning of the movie, Batman, like I said, is out looking for a dirty bomb that's been set somewhere in Gotham City by the Joker. Mm-hmm. The Joker is in his cell in Arkham Asylum. But he is all over this movie, whether he's in the scenes or not. Harley is clearly still in love with him, / angry with him, / over him, / not over him.
It's complicated.
It is very complicated between these two.
I'm fine. We're done. He's a jerk. Whatever.
Well, I'm convinced.
She's seen as a liability. I mean,
Yeah.
when they're brought together, she is questioned, and they wonder, should she really be on this mission? Because she has this relationship, or she's had a previous relationship with the Joker.
She has an intimate knowledge of Arkham Asylum, so she is required for this mission.
Yeah, she's pretty much essential.
But if she caught Joker's eye, who knows what could happen? So let's talk about their relationship a little bit, because we actually see them interact, Harley and the Joker. She is very angry with him.
What's your hurry, Hal?
He is very playful with her. We actually see over the course of the movie that he is not over her either.
So she's got herself a new guy. After everything I've done for her.
Which is something we don't see very often. We don't see the Joker thinking about Harley in the same way that Harley obsesses over him.
Well, I mean, I do. I have. I think that, yes, there are, this relationship, this romantic relationship is very well known in this world, in DC canon. And I think that we have seen several instances where, and again, now we're talking about storyline outside of this film, but we have seen that he has shown some attachment to her, some emotional bond toward her. He's sought her out. She's very special to him, and that's both romantic and somewhat compassionate, and it's also incredibly destructive.
Let's talk about that destructive nature a little bit. Throughout the course of this movie, it is revealed on several instances that the Joker is a bit abusive toward Harley.
Oh, he's not a bit abusive. He has asked her about her bruises that he's caused. So it's very clear that he's assaulted her. He's physically hit her. And again, outside.
And she even comes right out and says, yes, sure, sometimes he hits me, but,
And again, outside of the film, that happens. That's not unique to this story. So that is, that's a characteristic of their relationship. I mean, it's hard to talk about because there's clearly domestic violence. This is what we call intimate partner violence. And it's both, I think it goes both ways. We see that Harley is somewhat violent toward the Joker, and there are instances where she attacks him and she assaults him and she's verbally abusive toward him. Nonetheless, I think from his end, there is more malintent. There's definitely more, there's a sort of this like homicidal level of destruction from his side. And so this is a very unhealthy relationship. And I said it's hard to talk about because these are two characters that I care about. I really like these characters. I've always been very fond of both characters. I think they're just fascinating. And they both have these qualities that we've talked about that are similar to characteristics of persons who have antisocial personality disorder. We've talked about this in our show before. I believe it was Be a Clown from Batman the Animated Series and a couple other episodes featuring the Joker where we talked about features of antisocial personality disorder. If you have not listened to that, basically antisocial personality disorder is it's a mental health illness that's in adulthood. It is characterized by a person not having empathy, a person basically not having, basically a disregard for social norms, for rules, for other people's feelings. And so on one level or one side of the spectrum, you might have someone who's pretty uncaring and doesn't see that someone else might be hurting, doesn't see that your actions might have consequences. On the extreme side, then you have folks who are homicidal, you have folks who are violent, you have folks who are thrill seekers, do things that may feel good to them, may be pleasurable to them, and they may not care that it's hurtful to someone else. So both Harley and the Joker have those aspects as part of their personality. And when you put the two together, I mean, it's a formula for something really destructive and unhealthy. And we see this time and time again. We see how it actually does not work. And so what I can say, it's difficult to talk about them in a positive light because I do care about these characters. I do love them. But I don't want to glorify what they're, I don't want to glorify the decisions.
Fascination doesn't necessarily equal condoning
not at
their
all.
actions.
And I also want to say that even though I'm connecting these characters to a particular mental health illness, that doesn't mean that people with that mental health illness are homicidal, are just as destructive as the Joker, or that they're villains, in real life. So
sure.
I really want to make that distinction. So there's a level of complexity there that, we find these two characters to be, incredibly interesting. And for a lot of us, these are some of our favorite characters. And when you see them together, I almost think it's a good thing for us to just see how dysfunctional that is, and how it really hurts them both. And so if anything can be gained from this, it's that really is something, a formula that really would be the kind of relationship that we would discourage because of just, how unhealthy it would be for both of them.
Let's move beyond the characters individually. And let me ask you this, as a psychologist, is there any scenario where you could find yourself putting a team like this together, these people with these personalities and maybe even these disorders?
I mean, technically it shouldn't work, right? You have folks who are narcissistic, they have traits of antisocial personality disorder, they are, they have histories of being taken advantage of, so they can be resentful, they probably don't trust each other, they probably don't know what it's like to work together. So you have all these factors that you would think that it would not work out.
Right.
On the other hand, there are some commonalities. They may feel, and we actually see this with Deadshot and Captain Boomerang, that they actually have a history. There have been instances where they have worked together and it hasn't worked out. And there are instances where they've saved each other's lives. So with that kind of history, I think The Wall did a nice job of putting them together because they ultimately will defend each other in the end.
Right.
It's interesting that while you may think that these profiles wouldn't work together well, there is some research to show that sometimes when you have intergroup conflict, if there is this common goal, you can have a pretty cohesive group.
Gotcha.
Have you heard of Robber's Cave?
I have not.
Then we could talk about it.
Let's talk about Robber's Cave.
Oh, it was the summer of 1954 when psychology was fairly in its it was in its teen years, just experimenting, feeling stuff out, just kind of curious about what would happen if you
We're talking about psychology, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right.
So in the 50s, there was a study. Now it's called Robber's Cave. And it's one of those really well-cited studies that, you know, you'll learn about this in Psych 101. You'll learn about it in social psychology courses, because it was really one of the first studies to look at what would happen if groups of people are together who have sort of this conflict. How do you get them to work together?
Okay.
And so what these researchers did was they recruited a bunch of boys to visit the summer camp. They're probably between 11 and 12. And these two troops are basically recruited. So they set up these camps, and in the first week of the study, the two groups don't know about each other. So in the first week of the study, they're doing what you do at camp, which is, you know, go swimming, go hiking.
All the stuff you do at camp.
Yeah. So members of each group form a bond together. There's ultimately a leader forms, there's a hierarchy, they even come up with their own names. You know, it's the Rattlers against the Eagles.
I'm going to choose the eagle in that battle every time, because they're predators and they will come down and snatch up a snake on regular occasions.
Yeah, but rattlers are poisonous.
That has never stopped a bird of prey.
Anyway, okay. In the second week of the study, they actually introduced the groups. So now you've got 22 boys who are at the same camp. They're supposed to eat together, watch movies together, and, you know, of course, these two groups don't get along. It's like West Side Story. So the Rattlers and the Eagles begin to, they have these fights.
Dance. They start to snap their fingers.
No, they start to fight. They burn each other's flags.
They tie their wrists together, and they've got switchblades, and they're like, oh.
They're 11 years old.
Oh.
But it's the 50s. So they burn each other's flags. One kid even stole, like, the comic books of the one kid in the Eagles. So
Michael Jackson comes in, breaks them all up.
No, it's the 50s.
Eddie Van Halen is playing the guitar. Oh, all right.
So clearly there's this conflict between the two groups. So ultimately the researchers decide we've got to find a way to get them to get along. And they try various things, but they realize that it isn't until there's this, like, third enemy, in order for them to feel bonded, to connect with each other, they have to have this common goal. They have to agree upon, needing to come up with a plan to be able to go up against this other obstacle that everyone is experiencing. So here in the camp, it was they decided to shut off the water. And so it wasn't
Jason. It wasn't Jason
no.
Voorhees. It was, they shut off water.
Well, right. And so, of course, the kids were complaining, and then they banded together and they problem solved together, and they found that they were able to work together to get the counselors to be able to solve this issue. And they had other instances of working together, but ultimately, this study, I know it sounds somewhat mundane now, but the study at the time was groundbreaking because it showed that you could have this huge rift, this big conflict between these two groups. And if they have this common goal, if they have this third enemy, they're able to work together and they're able to form really authentic, real bonds together. And by the end of the camp, all the kids were really getting along. And
they had taken up a conch shell. They had killed Piggy.
That was a different camp.
Oh, wow. Look,
here's a picture of their flag. Eagles, you may win, but we will give you a hell of a fight. That's the motto. So basically the point of the study is that groups form very easily. Of course, if there's this common goal, they're more likely to cooperate. And here, in Suicide Squad, you have just this band of criminals and outlaws, and you'd think they would never get along. They would never help each other. And you find that actually they do.
It's interesting because, again, without giving spoilers, there are two different cases here. They're on an individual mission together. And they do work reasonably well together, but not exactly. They're not incredibly bonded. It's not until they're given another mission amongst themselves, which is to sort of go up against Amanda Waller, that they really unite. And so, again, you've got this case of these criminals with these dysfunctional personalities who do come together when they realize that there is a greater threat than what they were facing before.
Yeah.
Let's talk about another scene in the movie. We are at Arkham Asylum. Let's talk about the controversial ECT therapy.
Mm-hmm. We're introduced to ECT in this film when the Riddler brings the Suicide Squad into a room.
So what is ECT?
ECT is, well, it used to be electroshock therapy.
Right.
But now ECT is electroconvulsive therapy. Of course, shock, that word is a little bit alarming. It's a little bit shocking.
I don't know. I think I would probably rather have a shock than convulsive. That to me, no more pleasant a word.
We see them go into this room in Arkham, and the Riddler explains that this is where ECT was conducted.
Grab a chair.
And he has each of the members strap up into a chair, and ultimately the decision is that they're going to undergo ECT. So you'll have to watch the film to understand why. But what I found kind of interesting is that the room, the setup had multiple chairs together, and I can't imagine any scenario, whether at Arkham or another kind of facility, where you would have several chairs together. You would.
So you're not just cranking these out. You're not just like
multiple. It's not group ECT. Like multiple people would not be receiving ECT at once.
Okay.
I mean, mainly that's a lot of electricity.
Right.
But I don't. It just seems like it's risky. It seems like you would have just limitations on your ability to monitor the procedure. It also just seems kind of unethical to have other people there. So I didn't like that, but I understand why they did it in the film.
So let's talk about ECT. It's controversial. One of those therapies that some people are very much behind. In fact, some former patients are very much behind it. A lot of people, you might be too young to remember Dick Cavett, but Dick Cavett, who is a very famous talk show host, had ECT when he was younger to help fight his depression, and is a huge advocate
some people are
of ECT. Some other people find it to be barbaric.
Some people are very surprised that they still do ECT.
Explain the process and what it is that it's actually, for lack of a better word, fixing.
Yeah. So ECT was pretty much used, I would say that the 40s and 50s is when ECT was used as a particular treatment for depression and for some other conditions.
Bipolar disorder, I know, was one.
Yeah, and so over the years, it's been fine-tuned. I think, as you mentioned, it has been controversial because it can be performed incorrectly and inhumanely. So with ECT, electrodes are put on the patient's scalp, and finely controlled electrical current is applied. Essentially, they're given a seizure, and the electrical current is what causes, or what is believed to be the essential ingredient of the treatment. That's what's supposed to help people.
I guess at one point in time they described it as there were certain things that weren't firing properly, or there were certain pathways in the brain that may have been blocked, and somehow or another the electric current would then kickstart those firings or synapses or pathways, would unblock those pathways. Your brain would start working again properly because of the intense electric shock.
I mean, right. It's much more complicated than that. I mean, it's not like you just kind of like go back to normal. It's rattled everything in place. That's really not the way it works. But you're correct in that the electricity, that the electric currents are what's run through the brain system, and that causes enough change to the neurobiology, essentially the neurochemistry of the brain, so that the imbalance is no longer dysfunctional. The imbalance being what's causing the depression, bipolar disorder, suicide thoughts, those kinds of things. So what is kind of cool from what we see in Assault on Arkham is that some of the procedural portrayal and descriptions that the Riddler gives is accurate. You do, when you go through ECT, you are given kind of a little mouthpiece to put it in between your teeth. It's a mouth guard to keep you from biting down on your tongue and hurting yourself. There are these, of course, electrodes put on your head. And, of course, electric shock is administered for a few seconds through your system. Usually it's about 20 seconds. And I should say, you just don't do it one time. You have to have several sessions of this over the course of several months.
Yeah, I think Dick Cavett even said that back when he was doing it, he had like 10 or 12 sessions. And, you know, it was after those sessions that he started to feel right again.
Yeah.
Imagine being strapped to a gurney or a chair and having 10 to 12 sessions where someone puts electric current through your head.
I mean, I think just even now that process is really unsettling.
Yeah.
And some people really swear by it. They believe that it is the only thing that works. And I should add that folks with depression don't just walk into a clinic and they give this to you. Usually this is administered after several trials of, you know, antidepressants, psychotherapy, other types of treatments that are not as invasive. Mm-hmm. Because if those other treatments work, you know, you shouldn't have to go through these ECT treatments. But for folks that do not respond to medication, psychotherapy, and a number of interventions that are usually effective for some of these problems, ECT is a way to go. And again, it can be effective, and some patients have found it to be just a miracle. They say it saved their lives. Just a few months ago, BBC News Health, one of the websites on BBC News, had published this interesting article with video about ECT and some accounts from patients, and it's done in a really nice way. So I'll add that as a link to the show so people can kind of learn more about what this procedure is. So
very cool.
So yeah, so in the film, some aspects of it, I think the most important aspects of it are portrayed accurately, and then there's some aspects of it that maybe are not so realistic, but it's not as important.
So let's talk about the film itself. What worked for you? What didn't work for you?
I think what worked for me was the psychology of the group, the cohesiveness, the problem solving, helping each other, realizing and recognizing each other's abilities. Mm-hmm. If you think about who these folks are, they've been rejected, they've been traumatized, they've done something wrong, and so they're being punished. Mm-hmm. In the beginning of the film, they're all either incarcerated or in mental health facilities, and so they're given this chance, they're given this opportunity, and it's like for once, other people are believing in them, you know. And it sounds sick and twisted just saying this that way, but they're on this suicide mission, but people believe in them, and they have an opportunity to flex some of their muscles, some mm-hmm. of their skills, things that they're being told they can't do. Right. So I really enjoyed that part.
Anything didn't work for you?
There are at least three romantic relationships that are covered, that we kind of process. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I don't know if it's that I saw them as unhealthy relationships and that's why I didn't like it. Or it could just be that they weren't as integral to the story. I don't know. But those romantic relationships or physical relationships, if you can call it that, they kind of sidetracked me.
The plot of the movie for me was a little touch and go. It's basically as if someone went and saw Brian De Palma's first Mission Impossible movie. Essentially, the plot of this film is that the Suicide Squad is sent to Arkham Asylum to pick up the Riddler's cane because on there, he essentially has the knock list. He has got a list of every member of the Suicide Squad who has ever been mm-hmm. out on missions, who has ever been incarcerated for this or for that, and he's threatening to post it on YouTube or on the internet. And this is a story that we've seen before. We've actually seen it a few times. So it seemed a little trite to pull it back up. But they did do a good job of showing us good characters. I enjoyed their relationships. It was a ragtag group of folks. I did like watching them. Probably not unlike the enjoyment that I got from watching something like Guardians of the Galaxy, where it's this group that shouldn't work well together, but they do.
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
And I liked that. Would you recommend this movie to folks?
I would. I would say that it, as we talked about before, it's a little bit gritty.
Yeah.
It definitely has content, again, some violence.
Yeah.
Nudity, some stuff that isn't appropriate for younger audiences.
Yeah.
But I liked that grittiness. I liked that aspect of it. Occasionally, that's the kind of Batman movie that I want to see.
Yeah. I thought it was enjoyable, and I would recommend it. It is intense, but it's one that I'm glad that we got a chance to see. You guys can absolutely pick this up. It's downloadable now from iTunes, from Amazon, a number of other places, anywhere you can download movies, I guess. But you can also pick it up as a DVD, as a Blu-ray DVD combo, and they've got a digital copy in there. And, it's one of those that we recommend. Yeah. So nicely done, Warner Brothers and the DC Animated Universe. Drea, where can everybody find you online?
I don't do freaky deaky. Can you please?
You gotta put in the more guttural. I don't do freaky deaky.
I don't do freaky deaky.
Yeah, that was good. That was a good one. All right, you won that one.
That was terrible.
Yeah.
I don't do freaky deaky.
You let us know. Was it terrible, or was that a good? I don't do freaky deaky.
Stop! I don't like that Buffalo Bill version.
Well, yeah. Was she a great big fat person?
Stop! What's wrong with you? Okay.
Where can they find you online?
I am at Arkham Asylum Doc on Twitter, and my website is underthemaskonline.com.
And I am at bward028, and you can find us on Twitter together at Arkham Sessions.
Not really together, but
we both man at Arkham Sessions.
Oh, that's true.
So you can definitely tweet us there, and we'll be happy to tweet you back. You can also email us, arkhamsessions@gmail.com. Always happy to hear your thoughts, get your feedback. Thanks once again to Comics Alliance for supporting us, and thank you guys for listening. If you're listening on iTunes, be sure to rate us. Give us your review. Let us know what you think, as long as it's good. We gotta keep those stars high. That's it for this week.
Awesome. See you next week.
Yeah. Until then, I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Andrea Letamendi.
And we are
the Arkham Sessions.